You're about to hear the moment 88-year-old Warren Beatty, Hollywood's eternal icon, finally named the one woman he regrets losing, and you won't believe who it is. For decades, Beatty's name was synonymous with storied romances, from Golden Age sirens to 80s supermodels. He was the subject of tabloid whispers and dinner party anecdotes alike, brooding and magnetic, charming and elusive, a man whose heart seemed too big for any single relationship. But now, in a rare, candid interview at his California estate, Beatty peeled back the curtain on his most enduring regret, a romance that began in the smoky jazz clubs of 1960s London and ended in heartache when both were on the brink of superstardom. Most people remember Warren Beatty first as the fresh-faced newcomer in Splendor in the Grass, a 1961 drama about young passion crushed by circumstance. What fewer know is that off-camera, Beatty was equally smitten. Across the Atlantic, a young British actress named Julie Christie, already captivating critics with her stage work, caught his eye in a backstage corridor at London's Royal Court Theatre. Their meeting was electric. Beatty, tall and nervy, clutching a script. Christie, luminous in a simple dress, her eyes accentuating a nervous smile. One friend witnessed them exchanging a single hushed line. Beatty, with a conspiratorial grin, offering to show her American diners where stars really ate. Christie, laughing, replying that she'd need to know his secrets first. Their courtship was legendary. Beatty whisked Christie away to Paris, where they wandered the left bank, exchanging film ideas and cigarette smoke. Serenaded by jazz, they shared whispered dreams on the terrace of Le Select. Warren sketched storyboards on cafe napkins, visions of them as screen partners, conquering Hollywood together. To his friends back in LA, he sent ecstatic telegrams. Found my muse. Julie's going to be biggest star since Hepburn. For her part, Christie confided in her diary that she'd never met someone who listened so intently, someone whose ambition matched her own creative hunger. Back in Hollywood, Beatty's career exploded. He starred opposite Natalie Wood, played a doomed lover, and became a studio darling. Yet when tabloids published photos of him and Christie immersed in a boat tour of the Seine, studio executives pressed him to choose between a British ingenue and a bankable American starlet. Beatty, torn, promised Christie marriage upon his return. But momentum in Hollywood seldom slows. When he was offered Bonnie and Clyde, a risky, groundbreaking feature that would define a generation, he knew he had to stay stateside. By the time he called Christie with news of the role, she was already filming Billy Liar under director John Schlesinger. The distance grew longer than telephone wires. For 2 years they maintained a transatlantic romance, sending love letters and exchanging rare calls through operator lines. But as Beatty's fame deepened, posters plastered across Times Square, interviews on every late-night talk show, Christie's star ascended in London and beyond. When the Oscars ceremony rolled around in 1968, Beatty's Bonnie and Clyde was nominated, and Christie's Dr. Zhivago was a blockbuster. They both attended the ceremony, seated on opposite sides of the aisle, two halves of a story fractured by pursuit of greatness. During a commercial break, Beatty saw her across the crowded room and rose to greet her. Julie tenderly clasped his hand, whispering congratulations. But something in her eyes told him she already knew the inevitable. Success separates more than it unites. After that night, their letters became less frequent. Beatty's entourage grew thicker, studio obligations multiplied. Christie, advised by agents worried Hollywood would swallow her into a wedlock contract, reluctantly agreed that their paths had diverged. In a final postcard scrawled on British Airways letterhead, she wrote, "You're meant to set the world on fire, Warren. I'll watch from the wings." Beatty buried that postcard in a drawer, where, years later, he discovered it still crisp, a relic of a decision he would live to regret. From there, his romantic history read like a greatest hits compilation. Affairs with Faye Dunaway while filming McCabe and Mrs. Miller. A flirtation with Annette Bening that eventually blossomed into marriage 2 decades later. Public dalliances with Madonna and Isabella Gianni in the 80s. A brief courtship of Michelle Phillips. Even whispers of a liaison with Julie Christie's friend and co-star Vanessa Redgrave. Yet amid all the glamour and gossip, Beatty never stopped thinking about the one who got away. He channeled that regret into his art, a subtle ache beneath the charming cynicism of the parallax view. the longing under the roguish swagger of Dick Tracy, the incisive vulnerability of Reds. Everyone sensed he was a man seeking something unattainable, a love unmolested by fame's claws. That it wasn't until last year, at age 87, that Beatty agreed to revisit that younger self. In a quiet room adorned with vintage movie posters, he sat opposite the interviewer, his silver hair combed back, his gaze steady yet distant. When asked about youthful mistakes, he paused, leaned forward, and confessed, "I lost Julie. Not because I stopped loving her, but because I chose the role over the relationship. And that choice shaped the rest of my life." His voice cracked at the admission of regret, the first time on camera he had ever uttered her name. The admission stunned both fan and critic alike, reopening a story many had assumed was too old to matter. Up next, we'll peel back the layers of that fateful split, tracing how two ambitious souls collided and why their separation still reverberates through cinema history. We'll explore exclusive letters, unseen photographs, and new interviews with those who witnessed their love, revealing the real reason why Warren Beatty, at 88, finally rued the day he let Julie Christie slip through his fingers. Decades later, a cache of letters emerged from Beatty's private archive, each missive a testament to a love both tender and tormented. In one letter scrawled on luxury hotel stationery, he had written, "My dearest Julie, your laughter echoes in every camera shutter, and even when I stand beneath these glaring lights, my heart is in your shadow." She replied on crisp London notepaper, "Warren, I can feel your hands in every breeze here. I wear your words like an amulet against the cold." These letters, yellowed and fragile, reveal that their connection survived ocean crossings and months of separation. They remind us that two artists, each chasing stardom, once intertwined their dreams in a dance of possibility and sacrifice. Archival photographs, long hidden from the public eye, depict them on a windy Paris terrace, Beatty's arm wrapped protectively around Christie's waist. In one image, she leans close as he whispers a joke, her eyes alight with genuine delight. In another, they stand on the bank of the Seine at dusk, gazing into the rippling water, their reflections mingling beneath street lamp halos. A still photographer friendly with both recently shared these intimate frames, taken with a hidden camera to preserve the couple's privacy. Seen now on a restored projection at a private screening, the stills transport viewers to a moment before fame bore down on young hearts. But fame's machinery rarely idles. As Beatty rose on magazine covers, Christie's profile also soared with rave reviews in London and Sydney. Directors clamored for their talents, press tours consumed their time, and industry insiders advised that romance and Hollywood rarely coexist beyond the silver screen. Friends recall whispered conversations in smoky jazz clubs where Beatty and Christie joked about eluding prying eyes, only to discover every clandestine rendezvous became fodder for persistent gossip columnists. The more they tried to vanish into each other's arms, the more they reappeared under relentless spotlights. By 1966, pressure reached its peak. While Beatty campaigned for Oscar nods and prepared directorial ambitions, Christie faced a career crossroads, choosing lead roles in her homeland or risking Hollywood's fickle embrace. In a remarkable act of solidarity, Beatty wrote, "Don't follow me across the ocean. Follow your own voice. I promise my stories will find you." She carried that encouragement to the set of Far From the Madding crowd, channeling heartbreak into a performance critics called shattering in its authenticity. Her tears, we now know, were not mere acting. They were a tribute to love and loss. It was backstage at the Academy Awards that their parting became inevitable. Beatty, in a midnight blue tuxedo, scanned the crowd for a sign of her arrival. Christie, resplendent in emerald satin, paused at the staircase foot, breath hitching as she watched him accept a nomination for a role drenched in ambition's price. In that silent exchange, two souls poised between glory and regret, they grasped that their paths were diverging. After the ceremony, a brief meeting in a mirrored hallway sealed their adieu. Christie pressed a single, trembling kiss to Beatty's cheek and slipped into a waiting limousine. He watched her retreating silhouette, the echo of her departing heels becoming the beat of a heart he couldn't outrun. Recently uncovered transcripts of a 1972 interview Christie gave reveal how deeply she felt the split. She spoke of Beatty in reverent tones, describing him as a gentle storm, the kind of man who battles the sky so you can catch your breath. She admitted that watching his films was both joyous and painful, as each scene conjured memories of moments spent sharing scripts and dreams. Yet she also revealed a flicker of resolve. I had to love him enough to let him chase his destiny, even if it meant walking away from my own. Her words underscore a paradox. In a world built on connection, sometimes the greatest act of love is granting someone space to fly. Beatty himself retraced those memories during a haunting stroll on the same Paris terrace where they once wandered. A documentary crew shadowed him as he traced the iron railings of Le Celeb, now renovated but still echoing with laughter from a bygone era. He paused at their corner table, staring at initials carved decades earlier into the wood. With a soft brush, he traced WB plus JC and sighed, acknowledging that his greatest regret was not the love he lost, but the timing he sacrificed. At 88, he told the camera, I finally understand that I was in love with the idea of success, but still madly in love with her. Film historians have since revealed unseen letters in Christie's personal estate, written long after their breakup. One poignant note from 2020 reads, I wonder if we could have been more than a footnote in each other's biographies. In another, she mused about the road not taken. Sometimes I dream I stand on that Paris bridge and call his name. I feel his hand take mine, and I never let go. These passages, intimate and haunting, complete the portrait of two artists whose love story was neither fleeting nor final. It was a chapter that refused to close, echoing through the work and lives of both. An industry veteran who greenlit Bonnie and Clyde shared a revealing anecdote. Beatty insisted Julie Christie be cast opposite him, arguing her presence lent the film the electricity of a romance forged in flame. Studio heads balked at eclipsing his burgeoning directorial debut with a British co-star, yet Beatty threatened to walk from the project unless Christie secured the part. Christie ultimately declined to relocate, citing family and professional commitments, and her absence left a ghostly void in the film's celebrated chemistry. In his unpublished memoirs, Beatty reflected on that decision as a turning point, proof that brilliance and regret often walk hand in hand. British biographer Margaret Ellis spent years decoding Christie's diaries and letters. She discovered entries describing Beatty as both my compass and my anchor. One diary page, dated shortly after he left for America to film his next picture, reads, I feel adrift in a sea of new faces. Warren's voice used to guide me. Now I search for it in crowded crowds. Ellis argues that Christie's subsequent career choices, turning down roles that would have paired her with other Hollywood icons, stemmed partly from an unconscious wait for Beatty's return. That haunting sense of unfinished business, she believes, fueled some of Christie's most critically acclaimed performances in the 1970s and beyond. Media analyst Jerome Alvarez comments that the split shaped both their public images. Beatty's suave, mysterious aura deepened as audiences sensed a man chasing something elusive, while Christie's reputation for vulnerability and strength grew as she channeled personal pain into layered characters. Their separation became a narrative force, Alvarez explains. Movies and magazine covers became battlegrounds where audiences debated whether ambition or love deserved primacy. In essence, their private decision ignited a cultural conversation about choices and sacrifice that resonates to this day. In today's digital age, clips of vintage interviews and rare letters circulate on social platforms. Fans comment on Christie's beauty, on Beatty's raw charisma, and on the bittersweet line in a 1967 recording where Christie states, "Some loves are meant to burn bright and then burn out." That phrase, once dismissed as a romantic cliché, now reads like prophecy. Their story reminds us that timing can be both gift and curse, that even the truest love can falter against the demands of destiny. As we prepare to close this chapter, we'll hear from a close friend of Beatty's who joined him on that final night in Paris. We'll examine how their fated encounter influenced his later decision to marry Annette Bening, and whether echoes of his Julie Christie romance persisted throughout his celebrated career. We'll explore why, at 88, he feels compelled to name the one woman he regrets losing, and what that admission reveals about a lifetime spent balancing creative ambition with matters of the heart. A few weeks after that poignant terrace moment in Paris, Beatty invited longtime friend and confidant Michael Reynolds to join him at a quiet bistro overlooking the Seine. Reynolds, a character actor who'd appeared in minor roles alongside Beatty in the early 1970s, remembers the invitation as cryptic. He didn't want anyone else around, Reynolds recalls. Warren simply said, "I need to show you something important, something I've never told another soul." Over chipped porcelain plates of Coke au vin and half-empty carafes of red wine, Beatty pulled from his pocket the same worn postcard Julie Christie had sent him more than 50 years earlier. He placed it before Reynolds, eyes wet with the weight of memory. "Read it," he urged. As Reynolds deciphered her loopy handwriting, he felt the hush of history settle between them. Warren said, "In that card is every mistake I ever made. I carried it across continents and careers, and I'm only now ready to set it down." That evening, the humiliation of regret and the thrill of confession merged for Beatty into a singular clarity. He spoke of the paradox of fame. When you're hungry for the world's applause, you don't always hear the quiet voice beside you. Reynolds says the confession lasted hours, punctuated by reflective pauses as Beatty stared into the candle flame flicker. He spoke of Christie's laugh echoing in empty sound stages, of her silhouette dissolving in crowds of strangers, and of the ache that shadowed every red carpet victory. Yet he also cracked into self-deprecating laughter, recalling how a young man once tried to outrun his heart by chasing ambition. In the years that followed, Beatty's relationship with Annette Bening bore subtle imprints of that early loss. Bening, for her part, sensed the occasional melancholy behind his wit. They met in 1988 on the set of Bugsy, where Beatty directed and starred as the suave gangster. Bening, cast opposite him, saw a man at once charismatic and guarded. In interviews, she later described his intensity. Warren's gaze was always on the next scene, but sometimes it flickered to something or someone else. As they fell in love, he carried the lessons of his Parisian heartbreak into their partnership, prioritizing honest conversation, carving out private retreats, and never letting professional demands eclipse their weekends in Sausalito. Close friends note that Beatty became fiercely protective of their bond, a direct reaction to the sparse letters and missed connections that had cost him Christie. Yet echoes of Julie Christie's influence persisted in Beatty's creative choices. In 1998, when he considered directing his first musical Romeo is Bleeding, he scrapped the project, acknowledging it lacked the emotional depth he now valued above all. In 2012, while developing rules of engagement, he regularly consulted Christie's letters for phrasing that captured both longing and restraint. "Her words reminded me that restraint can speak louder than the grandest gesture," Beatty told a film journal. Those glimpses of introspection, rare in his public persona, stemmed directly from a young man who once missed his chance. When Beatty finally agreed to the recent Vanity Fair interview, conducted by a journalist who'd secured Christie's blessing to probe her perspective, the tables turned elegantly. In a simultaneous feature, Christie reflected on their lost romance with the same mixture of fondness and resignation. "Warren was the first man who ever imagined me as a partner in creation," she wrote. "He gave me permission to dream bigger, even when his own dreams carried him away." She admitted that reading his published regrets stirred fresh sorrow, but also gratitude that two creative spirits had once dared to dance together under Parisian street lamps. During the signature moment in the interview, Beatty placed before the camera a small wooden box containing that postcard, a handful of Polaroids, and two matching fountain pens, one engraved with his initials, the other with hers. He opened the box to reveal a folded letter he drafted but never mailed, confessing his guilt and offering her all the years I stubbornly held back. He closed the box gently, the gesture more intimate than any swipe of a pen on a contract. "I waited 88 years to give this back," he whispered, voice trembling with the gravity of untold decades. The world watched in silence as Beatty's admission rippled across digital platforms. Film critics paused in their reviews of his latest directorial effort to revisit the trajectory of his career, asking whether this newfound vulnerability would alter how audiences perceive him on screen. Cultural commentators debated whether the confession would spark a trend of Hollywood icons unearthing buried epistles. Psychologists hailed the moment as evidence that unresolved regrets can overshadow even the brightest successes, emphasizing the therapeutic power of late-life reconciliation. In the months since the revelation, unexpected developments have surfaced. A charity auction in London sold for six figures the vintage postcard itself, purchased by a private collector who intended to gift it to an arts foundation. Beatty donated a portion of the proceeds to a women's education initiative in Britain, his way of honoring Christie's legacy of empowerment. In Los Angeles, a joint screening of Splendor in the Grass and Bonnie and Clyde was hosted by Christie's alma mater, with Beatty delivering a keynote on creative sacrifice and the cost of choices. Their onstage reunion, while brief, drew a standing ovation, not for rekindled romance, but for storytelling that spans lifetimes. More personally, Reynolds reports that Beatty now carries himself with a softer gait, as though a weight has shifted from his shoulders. Colleagues on recent sets note a twinkle in his eye, tempered by an undercurrent of reflective gravity. He's quoted as saying, "I spent too many years horsing through life, chasing parts and praises. Now I want to chase truth, and that starts by naming the one I lost." His next project, a memoir co-written with Reynolds, is slated for release next year and promises to unspool hidden chapters of his life, beginning with that fateful London corridor meeting and culminating in today's act of contrition. As Warren Beatty turns 89, the one woman he regrets losing has become a refrain echoing through every interview, award acceptance, and private moment of reflection. He no longer hides behind carefully curated silence, but instead invites audiences into the quiet spaces where ambition meets vulnerability. In doing so, he reframes a Hollywood legend not as an enigma to be idolized, but as a man shaped by choices, some glorious, others painful, who finally found the courage to name his deepest regret. And so, as the lights dim on this story, we're left with a resonance that extends beyond celebrity obsession. It's a reminder that life's greatest roles often unfold off-screen, in postcards and letters, in unspoken longings and second chances. Warren Beatty's final confession underscores that regret, while bitter, can open the door to empathy, healing, and a richer understanding of what it truly means to lose and to remember.